Prologue. Hi, my name is Jason, and thanks for tuning into this second unboxing video. Just a couple of first things first here. I had already shot this video a couple of days ago, but going kind of through the editing process, I thought I needed to include this little prologue because there was a couple of things I skipped over. If you want more details on stuff, go ahead and watch the very first video of these two, where you can see me unbox and assemble my Himiway Black Cruiser. But in this one, we're going to watch me unbox and assemble my wife's white Stepthru Cruiser. It's going to be much more abbreviated than that one. But I do want to make a couple of other points here. Some of you gave me a lot of words of encouragement, so thank you very much for that. That means a lot to me. I did get a couple of direct mails regarding my presentation style, and I just want to let you guys know, look, Himiway is not paying me. I am not a professional biker. I am not a professional YouTuber. And for all intents and purposes, I'm just a guy building a bike and wanting to go exploring with my friends and my wife on the weekends. By no means am I an expert in bicyclery and all the different components and stuff like that. There are plenty of YouTube videos out there for that. Again, this is just me sharing my experience with you guys. So if you're okay with that, we'll get into it in a second. I will, however, tell you a little bit of update on my bike. Since I've got my bike a couple weeks ago, I've put on close to 100 miles. One thing I am very happy to tell you guys is I had to change out the seat. I'm on a Cloud9 seat now with a suspension post, and that makes a world of difference, let me tell you. Number two, I'm 230 pounds. I've only had to charge my battery the initial battery one time, and I've gotten almost 100 miles of that. Of course, I'm not using pedal assist the whole time. I'm trying to bike as much as I can under my own power. And up to this point, I've never even got out of pedal assist number two. So again, probably just 1 and 2 here and there. And I'm averaging just under about 100 miles on a charge, which is pretty phenomenal. But again, I'm doing 80% of the work myself. Of course, your mileage may vary, but enough of that. Let's get right into the video, and I hope you enjoy this part 2 of a Himiway Stepthru unboxing and assembly. Today will be my second build of a Himiway e-bike. Today, surprise to my wife and I, her Stepthru Himiway showed up kind of unexpectedly. I had got the notice from FedEx just basically like 2 days ago, and I thought, well, if it was anything like my Cruiser, when I got the FedEx notice, we figured, well, okay, it's going to be at least 2 weeks. But this one, from the time that we got the FedEx notice, it literally showed up 2 days later. So my black Cruiser, from the time I had ordered it to the time I received it, was about 5 weeks. And I ordered my wife's Stepthru the exact same time. And I would say we are at about the 7-week mark. So it was 7 weeks from the time I ordered it to the time we received it. If you went ahead and didn't catch it, go ahead and click the card in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and you will see me go through my initial build of my Cruiser. This one will probably be a little bit shorter since I won't go into the epilogue more or less like I did in the first video there. And this will be a pretty much straightforward unboxing and kind of an abbreviated build. Again, probably not going to be a huge time lapse. Just wanted to show you guys what you can expect. And the one thing that I will say that I'm much more happy about this time around is the box is in much better condition. My Cruiser, actually, if you can check out the other video, there was a couple of dings in the box, and it looked like it had been on and off the truck multiple times. Her Stepthru Cruiser box is in much better condition, so I'm kind of hoping that that's indicative of what we're going to go ahead and find out inside. So let's go ahead and switch camera views and get right into it. Okay, as I just previously stated, as you can see, the box is in much better condition than the box I got for my Cruiser. Actually, all 4 ties here are still wrapped around. The tape looks like it's all in one piece. The corners, believe it or not, are even in good condition. So this is a very, very good sign, I think, for this. But we're going to get right into it, cut these nylon straps, and start unboxing. Well, as you can see, I went ahead and took the sidewall off the box here to expose the packing inside. And just like my bike that came a couple weeks ago, the packing inside is really nice. However, I do want to point out something here on the Stepthru is I did end up getting the model with the reflector, which my bike did not come with the reflector. And I'm not sure I'm keen about the lettering here on the tires here. It says Crusade Sport, and that's kind of, in my opinion, a little obnoxious looking. But what are you going to do? Now, I know I said earlier I probably wasn't going to do too much of a time lapse here, but I figure for a couple minutes you can watch me go ahead and cut some of this stuff up, and I'll go ahead and speed up this recording here, and you get the general idea what's going on before I go ahead and assemble. Okay, as you can see, I've taken away most of the packaging, or at least 90% of it. Left obviously the things for the tires here and on the rear light and the handlebars, because I haven't got to that. But one of the next things I wanted to point out to you was the battery. So if you go ahead and look at my first video, when I unboxed the battery from my Himiway Cruiser, the seal was broken here. The seal is not broken. That's a good sign, and it's much more intact than mine was. So I think her battery is a little bit better condition. I'm sure my battery is absolutely fine, but I do feel better that the sticker, the void, if removed, is intact here. Also, I discovered, I thought maybe I could use my key that came with my bike to remove her battery, but that wasn't the case. I actually have the keys, or the locking mechanisms for these bikes are indeed different. And when I looked at the different keys themselves, there is a number associated on the keys. So there must be, a couple dozen different types of keys, the teeth on them. So make sure that you don't lose your keys, because they are not universal keys. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the charger in the meantime, and let's go ahead and open up the accessory box. It's pretty much going to be the same accessories as mine, but I do want to point out something with the multi-tool. Okay, here's the Himiway accessory box. Go ahead and open it up and find what we have inside here. We have the hat, just like we did in the last one. We have the front axle sprocket right here. We have the derailleur guard that's going to go on the back, covering up the Atlas derailleur system. We have her multi-tool, and while I'm talking about the multi-tool, I got one of these as well with my Himiway, and if you remember, I assembled it about 2 weeks ago. However, this is what my multi-tool looks like now. Believe it or not, it's not the strongest thing. I used a couple of these Allen wrenches to try to take off the seat, and just my normal grip ended up bending this thing way out of whack a little bit here. Let me get that back into frame. So you can see this is a new multi-tool, and this is mine, and that's just my hand strength really warped to the outside of it. If you guys get a chance, I would totally recommend getting a 15 millimeter open socket wrench yourself. And if you have some Allen wrenches on your own, as opposed to using the multi-tool, this is good for on-the-road repairs in a jiffy, but I don't know if I would really recommend using this as the one-all be-all tool. Of course, it'll work in a pinch, but probably not the best quality. But anyway, moving on, we have, again, both the left and right pedals. And again, like I stated in my last video, make sure that you look at the pedals very carefully before you put them on, because the left pedal is marked with a little stamp on there, and it definitely has to go on the left-hand side. It's the way that the threads are mounted there on the sprockets. So look for that. There's a big R here on this side, but if you look down, there's going to be these little stamps right on and you probably can't see it in the video, but there's a stamp here and on this side here with a little R on there for the right. And I'm assuming, and I don't see it on here, but it's probably on the other side of this, there's got to be an L for the left side, and it's very important that you get that correct the first time out. We have, this box should contain our LED light, or headlight, which it does. Right there, we'll go ahead and assemble that later. We have a bag of some nuts and bolts and zip ties. The zip ties are going to be used for some of the cabling, especially the light, putting it on that back hatch there. This bracket is going to be used for mounting the headlight. There's a couple other odds and ends in here. That's more or less going to be to attach the front fender. We have the step-through manual, if you will. And then finally here in this box, we should have our power transformer. And currently right now, I'm not going to take this one out of the box as I am currently charging the battery using my power charger. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the bike itself. So before I get to the assembly of the handlebars and the front part, I wanted to point out something that at least it was a little bit more prominent to me, and maybe it's because of the white paint. I guess the lighting right now might not be the best in my garage, but with the white paint, I think the welds show up a lot more prominently down here. Right now, I guess these are in the shadows, but I had noticed that the welds back at the specific soldering joints, which were much more pronounced than they are on the black. That being said, one really cool bonus feature, though, that is not on the Himiway, my black Cruiser, on the step-through, you have mounts for, you know, a water bottle right there. So, again, that's not on the regular black Cruiser, but the step-through has this mount, which is really nice. I think that's a cool feature, and I kind of wish mine had that as well. That being said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the handlebars. Just like we did in the last video here, we're getting ready to mount the handlebars. And the first thing we're going to do is take our Allen wrench and remove these 4 screws in the front part of this bracket here. And we're going to go ahead and put the handlebars in and reattach this to about 90–95%. We're not going to cinch it down because we have to make sure that, first of all, the neck and the forks, once we take this wrapping off, are pretty much in line with each other. And then obviously when we adjust the seat, we're not going to cinch it down until she's comfortable with the handlebar placement. She's happy it's not too far forward, or maybe we need to bring it back a little bit. And once she's happy with it, then we'll go ahead and cinch it down. But again, you're just going to want to mount this to about like 95% and finish it up as part of your final touches. All right, as you can see, I went ahead and took off that front bracket and those 4 bolts there, if you will, with my Allen wrench, and that was using a 4mm Allen wrench. And before we go ahead and mount the handlebars, just make sure that you have it orientated the right way. We want these hash marks right here to more or less fit into this groove. We want to try to center it as best as possible. But before we do that, we also want to make sure that our electronic dashboard is nice and centered. And as you can see, it's a little off center. It's going a little bit this direction right now. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to take another Allen wrench, and I'm going to loosen both this screw here and this screw here. I'm not going to take it off. I'm just going to loosen it enough so I can slide this these two bands over maybe a couple millimeters and tighten that back down, just so that we know our electronic dashboard is centered. Also, be careful of these cables here. These are part of some of the electronics that go down to the controller. Here, make sure that everything is nice. There's some Velcro right here for cable management, and we'll get more into that later on. But just give everything a once over. Make sure that all the cables and everything is looking pretty good, which I think that this is. So next up is I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and mount this up and reattach this front bracket here. Now that I have the handlebars loosely attached, it's time to turn my attention to the front fork and the wheel. So this front wheel here, this black plastic cover is just going to pop right off. There's nothing magic to it. We're just going to pop it right off, and we're going to go ahead and attach this axle. And the most important thing to be aware of on this axle are these two conical springs. We're going to go ahead, and once we put the forks or the tire between the forks, we're going to go ahead and insert this and make sure that these springs are on either side and they are facing the cone side, or the small part of the cone in. We're going to go ahead and tighten this up and go ahead and latch it down. But it's very important that those springs are facing each other, as pointed out here, and they're on either side of the fork when we go ahead and insert the tire. So in the extra bag of nuts and bolts and screws, you're going to find two plastic screws in there, and that's what I used here to attach the rear light to the back of the platform rack. And I would suggest doing this first before you mount the rack, because once you have the rack on the bike, it's very hard to get a screwdriver and screws underneath there to attach this. You'll notice that there's 4 holes actually, but only 2 screws. I went ahead and obviously used the 2 inside screws, or the 2 inside holes. You can use the outside holes if you wanted to double down and get more screws. I guess you could do that, but I think we're okay there. And at this point now, we're going to go ahead and mount not only the rack here, but at the same time that I get ready to mount the rack, we're going to go ahead and loosen this screw here and take this part of the fender rail off, and this one as well, because we are going to go ahead and mount the derailleur guard. And I'll go ahead and do that actually before I put the rack on. And the rack is going to use this screw and the one opposite on that side, and the 2 right there, one on each side. But I might as well get the derailleur in first. And this, you're going to want to put the derailleur flush, or the derailleur guard flush against the frame of the bike, and this is going to go back over the top of that, and we'll tighten that down here in a second. So again, we want to take this one off, put the derailleur guard on, then reattach this, and then reattach those 2 screws. I can surely tell you guys that her rack, or the rack that came with my wife's bike, was better constructed than mine, and or maybe better milled, or the tubing here on either side was much more even. If you go and see my first video, one of these bars was kind of bent a little awkwardly. Not bad, but it was pretty tough to bend back into shape. My wife's rack here, the one that came with this one, was more or less pretty much dead even, pretty darn close. I would recommend attaching it to the top first and getting these two started, but not 100%. I've got these tightened to about 90%, and the reason why is now that gives me some adjustment or some leeway before I tighten everything down to get it here in place. And you want to make sure that of course the wire here is tucked underneath. You're going to use those zip ties that come in the bag of two, and you might want to go ahead and zip tie this cable that goes to the rear light there. You might want to zip tie a couple of things here, but make sure that you do leave a little bit of slack. You don't want it so tight that that would pull the wires out in case there was any kind of accident. I'm going to give it a little bit, you know, maybe a half an inch worth of slack. It's not going to get in the way of anything, but then with some Velcro, just like I did on the first bike, we'll go ahead and we'll get some of this excess and we'll clean it up. But for right now, I just wanted to show you, I've got these in about 90%. I'm going to go ahead and attach the other two. Once I get it on either side there, I'll tighten this down 100%, and then we'll go ahead and zip tie this cable up. Okay, you can see I used two zip ties there, and I went ahead and tucked that cable onto the inside of the frame of the rack there, and with some extra Velcro I went ahead and just bundled that up. I could probably do a little bit better job tucking this in somewhere and cleaning that up, but just to give you an idea before I go ahead and put the seat on its post, that's basically the idea. All we have left at this point is to go ahead and put on the front fender and the headlight and then the battery, and we should be good to go. Went ahead and attached the front fenders here, and actually this went on a little bit easier than the one that I did for mine. The one for my wife here, it seems she has a little bit more clearance here, and things went on pretty even. One thing to note is this bracket up here that holds the headlight, which is the last thing I need to do. When you tighten this up, you want to try to obviously get this as perpendicular or parallel to this bar as you can, but this nut up here, if you can follow my logic here, if you tighten it too tight to the right, it makes the fender skew this way, and if it's too loose or you tighten it, you know, this kind of can make the fender skew a little bit that way. So my suggestion really is to attach these two first. I mean, you're going to want to attach this, but just don't tighten this one down. You want to tighten these two down first, one on each side, and once that's pretty tight, then you can come up here and work on this last one here, and that's going to get you more or less kind of center down here and make sure that your tire has clearance so that the fender isn't skewing one way or the other way pretty good. You can make some minor adjustments to that as well to make sure that that the fender is clearing the tire. But now last thing we have to do is attach the headlight, and as I said in the other video, you have to be very careful here. You'll notice here there is some pins in here. This is the male connector, and it only fits into the female connector on the headlamp one way. You don't want to force it in. Those pins inside have to line up with those two holes. That's why that little notch is right there. If not, don't force it. Don't try to twist it. You can back this out maybe with some needle nose pliers and kind of try to bend them as straight as you can. But it's very important that you line those two pins along with that notch into the opposite unit on the headlight, and that's going to give you your solid connection. Hey there! As you can tell from my haircut, it's been a few days since I assembled my wife's Stepthru, and unfortunately the last segment that I filmed that was turning on the bike, showing you the dashboard and turning on the headlamp and adjusting the seat, that all kind of got corrupted. So if you really want to see that stuff, go ahead and check out my bike build. It's basically the same information and the same results, but suffice to say, my wife's bike came out fine. However, I figured I'll spend these last couple of minutes here giving, just like I did in the other video, a couple of little pointers and pieces of advice. Totally optional, but I think it's worth listening to and listening a second time. Number one, the first couple of times that you ride this bike and you get it back to your house, you're going to want to take out your multi-tool and your Allen wrenches and go over all like the little nuts and bolts again. You'll be surprised to find that the fenders, especially the little bolts on either side of the wheels or the rails that hold the fender to your wheels, might come a little bit loose. You might also want to check in case you had to adjust your handlebar on the neck. You might want to check both the two little nuts there on the neck and again on the handlebars. Make sure that that isn't loose. And then probably finally check out your kickstand and the front release or the quick release axle there on your front tire, and make sure that everything is still pretty secure. Number two, over the course of the next couple weeks, you're going to find that the brake cables are going to stretch out a little bit. So your first initial rides, when you're squeezing the brakes, you're going to get a nice response from it. But, with time, these cables are naturally going to stretch out. And so in about 2 or 3 weeks from now, you might find that there's a little bit more give on those. So I would advise watching a video by Tinkering Turtle, and he shows you basically how to remove the slack from the cables and how to use those barrel adjusters, both down where the brakes calipers are on both the front and the back and at the handlebars, and how to kind of make some subtle adjustments to get those brakes back in line. And then finally, again, when you turn on the bike, it's going to default to pedal assist level number 1. And it's a matter of just training your brain and getting used to it. You hop on a bike, you start pedaling it, and you forget it's in pedal assist number 1 by default. There is actually no way to get it to 0. When you first power on the bike, you manually have to toggle that little minus button down to 0 to get it there. And I tell you this because even though I've had this discussion with my wife a couple of times, the bike unfortunately has gotten the better of her on more than one occasion. She did have a minor spill the other day. Fortunately, she's okay. Just a little bit of scratches on her shins and a little bruise on her hip. And if anything, more embarrassed than anything. But the bike is okay. But for her, just trying to, for anyone, even for myself, trying to remember that when you turn on the bike, it's going to be in pedal assist number 1. Now, again, I'm 230 pounds. My wife is 125 pounds. The bike is still 71 pounds, and it still has the same motor underneath. So it can even get away from me. Imagine someone 100 pounds lighter than me, and that bike is going to take off. So she had a little bit, she's learning, but just to be aware that, if the bike gets away from you, don't be shocked about that. So that's probably the last little piece of advice that I can give you. Go ahead and watch other videos online. Again, by no means am I a biking expert. I'm just here sharing my experience with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm getting no endorsements from Himiway in any way, shape, or form. But I hope that you have a great experience out there. Be safe, and I hope to see you guys out on the trail.